The first thing Michael Myers felt was the smell. Not blood, not rot, not even the sharp iron sting of fear he had learned, over decades, to ignore. This smell was older, sweeter, like wet paper left too long in the dark, like a basement where childhood had drowned. He stood in the middle of a street that should not have existed. Haddonfield had rules. Streets went where they were supposed to go. Houses stayed where memory had nailed them down. But this street curved inward, subtly, as if bending to watch him. The lamps leaned like eavesdroppers. The night sky above was not a sky at all, but a swollen ceiling of clouds, low and breathing, pulsing faintly as though something enormous lay just beyond it, listening. Michael tilted his head. The mask hid his expression, but beneath it there was the same emptiness that had always been there. The shape. The thing that walked and killed and endured. Fear had never found purchase in him. It slid off, useless as rain on stone. A laugh echoed. Not loud, not mocking, amused. It came from everywhere and nowhere, stitching itself into the gaps between Michael's footsteps. Each step forward felt thicker than the last, as if the air itself were congealing around him, reluctant to let him pass. Then the street folded. The houses shrank. The lamps grew taller. The asphalt softened into something like linoleum, scuffed and yellowed. The smell intensified, and with it came a pressure behind Michael's eyes. Not pain, memory. He stopped. For the first time in many years, Michael Myers did not advance. The clown stepped out of the shadows, wearing a face that was not yet a face. It was still assembling itself. Pale skin stretching into place, eyes like coins sunk into dough. A smile that had not decided how wide it wanted to be. The red hair puffed and twisted as if it had been pulled from a nightmare rather than a head. "Well," Pennywise said, his voice bubbling like laughter heard through water, "you are a hard one to find anything inside of." Michael stared. The knife was in his hand. It always was. An extension of intention rather than flesh. Pennywise glanced at it and smiled wider. "Oh, I know. You do not feel fear. Everyone tells me that. They say you're empty." He leaned closer, his breath smelling of circus tents and storm drains. "But emptiness is just a room that has not been opened yet." The world shuddered. The street collapsed inward, walls sliding up around Michael, reforming, repainting themselves. The lamps became ceiling lights. The asphalt became carpet worn thin by years of pacing. The night sky flattened into a ceiling stained by age and silence. A house. Not any house. His house. Michael was smaller now. He did not notice the change at first. His perspective had shifted, but his mind resisted the implication. Only when the knife slipped from his fingers and struck the floor with a thin, childish clatter did something in him pause. His hands were small. The clown clapped. "There we are," Pennywise said softly. "I was beginning to worry." Michael looked down at himself. A boy's body, thin arms, knees knobby and pale. He wore pajamas printed with shapes that meant nothing now. The mask was gone. His face, his real face, stared back at him from a hallway mirror. Blank, pale, too calm, but not untouched. The house breathed. From upstairs came a sound that had not existed in years. A girl humming. Careless. Alive. Judith. The name did not echo like fear. It echoed like gravity. Michael moved, not with the slow, deliberate gait of the shape, but with the uncertain steps of a child being pulled by something he did not understand. Each step forward made the walls close in slightly, the hallways stretching and shrinking in turns, as if the house itself were deciding how much of the past to allow. Pennywise drifted behind him, floating rather than walking, fingers steepled under his chin. "Do you remember this part?" the clown asked. "The before?" Michael did not answer. The kitchen appeared exactly as it had been. The knife on the counter gleamed, too large for his hand, too heavy with promise. Pennywise watched closely now, eyes bright. "This is where it all starts," he whispered. "Where the dark chooses you. Where the first crack opens." Michael's small fingers curled around the knife, and for a moment, just one, something trembled inside him. Not fear, and not guilt. A pressure. Pennywise inhaled sharply, delighted. "There," he said. "There it is." The house lurched. Michael turned. The clown was no longer smiling. He was studying Michael with a new intensity, head tilted, pupils dilating. The pressure inside Michael did not bloom into fear as Pennywise expected. It flattened, it spread out, and became something smooth and cold. Michael took a step toward Pennywise. The clown blinked. "That's not," Pennywise began, and then laughed it off. "Oh, you're clever. You always were. But we're not done yet." The walls peeled away. The house elongated, hallways spiraling outward, doors multiplying like teeth. Each door opened onto another memory, another version. Michael killing, Michael standing, Michael staring. Pennywise grew taller as they walked. His limbs lengthened, joints bending wrong, shadow stretching across the floor. "You see?" the clown said, voice deepening. "You do not remember your childhood because it hurt. You remember it because it was taken from you. And I can give it back. Every second, every scream you swallowed." They reached a room that had never existed. It was bare, white, padded. Smith's Grove. Michael felt something then, not fear, recognition. Doctors' voices murmured from the walls. Needles glinted. Time pressed down, heavy and suffocating. Pennywise spread his arms, filling the space. "This is where they tried to name you," he said. "Tried to understand you. But they never looked deep enough. I will." Michael lunged. The knife struck Pennywise's chest and sank in deep. The clown looked down at it, surprised. Then he laughed. His body split open around the blade, not bleeding, not dying, but unfolding. Inside was darkness layered with teeth and lights and spinning memories that were not Michael's. "Oh, Michael," Pennywise crooned, "you cannot kill what lives on stories." The room dissolved. Michael fell. Down into something wet and laughing and ancient, where the past was not a place, but a flavor. And Pennywise followed, grinning, already feeding, not on fear, not yet, but on the delicious realization that for the first time in his long, empty existence, Michael Myers was being hunted. Michael fell for a long time, not downward in any direction that obeyed gravity, but inward, as if the world were folding him into itself. The sensation was not panic. Panic required uncertainty, and Michael Myers had never questioned inevitability. This fall felt like returning to a place that had been waiting patiently, collecting dust. Voices slid past him. Doctors, orderlies, children laughing somewhere far away. A television murmuring an old commercial jingle. Each sound brushed against him, tried to cling, but none of them stuck. They were memories stripped of emotion, hollow echoes. Then the fall stopped. Michael landed on his feet. He stood in a corridor that stretched impossibly far in both directions. The floor was tiled, white and clean, reflecting the lights above so brightly it hurt to look at them. The walls were padded, but not soft, more like skin stretched tight over something hard and unyielding. Smith's Grove again, or a version of it. Doors lined the corridor, evenly spaced, each with a small window at eye level. Behind some of them, movement flickered. Shapes paced. Hands slapped glass. Mouths screamed without sound. Michael took a step forward. The sound of applause echoed behind him. Slow, deliberate. "Well done," Pennywise said. "Most people do not land so gracefully." Michael turned. The clown stood at the far end of the corridor, but far was a flexible concept here. He was both distant and close, his body bending the space around him. His suit was cleaner now, brighter, the white fabric almost glowing under the lights. His face was fully formed, smooth, pale, ageless, and his eyes burned with a focused hunger. "You see," Pennywise continued, strolling toward Michael, "this place is very special. It's where they tried to fix you, mend you, scoop you out, and fill you with something they could understand." He stopped inches away. "They failed," Pennywise whispered, smiling. "But failure leaves residue, and residue is delicious." Michael raised the knife. His arm felt heavy, the movement slower than it should have been, as though the air itself resisted the idea of him attacking. Pennywise watched with fascination rather than concern. "Aha," the clown said gently, and snapped his fingers. The knife vanished. Michael's hand closed on nothing. For the first time, frustration stirred. Not anger, not fear, but an awareness of obstruction, of being acted upon. Pennywise's smile widened. "There it is again," he said. "That little ripple. You do not like being told no, do you?" The corridor shifted. The lights dimmed, flickering as if power were being rerouted elsewhere. The padded walls began to breathe, expanding and contracting in a slow rhythm that matched something massive and unseen. A door opened. A boy stepped out. Michael stopped. The boy was small, thin, wearing a hospital gown that swallowed his frame. His hair was neatly combed. His eyes were empty. A younger Michael. The child looked up at him without recognition. Pennywise circled them both like a ringmaster inspecting his performers. "This is you," he said to the adult Michael. "Or rather, this is what they thought you were. Contained, harmless, a puzzle waiting to be solved." The boy tilted his head. Adult Michael felt something tighten in his chest. Not sorrow, not remorse, pressure. The boy spoke. "When do I get to go home?" The voice was flat, emotionless. But the question lingered in the air, heavy as damp cloth. Pennywise leaned down to the boy's level. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, voice dripping with false warmth. "You never do." The clown's mouth opened wider than it should have, stretching impossibly, revealing rows of teeth that shimmered like pearls underwater. The boy did not scream when Pennywise swallowed him whole. There was only a soft sound, like paper tearing. The corridor snapped back into place. Michael stood alone with the clown. Pennywise wiped his mouth delicately. "Still nothing?" he asked, studying Michael's maskless face. "No fear, no grief, just that same lovely emptiness?" Michael lunged. He struck with his hands, with his body, with the full force of decades of violence honed into instinct. His fingers closed around Pennywise's throat. The clown laughed. The sound vibrated through Michael's bones, rattling his teeth. "Now that," Pennywise said, his voice warbling as his neck stretched unnaturally under Michael's grip, "is adorable." The walls fell away. They were no longer in Smith's Grove. They stood in a suburban street, drenched in autumn light. Leaves skittered across asphalt. Decorations hung from porches. Pumpkins grinned with carved teeth. Halloween. Children ran past them, laughing, costumed, oblivious. Michael froze. The mask was back on his face, and the knife was back in his hand. But something was wrong. The children ran through him, straight through. He was insubstantial, a shadow pretending to be solid. Pennywise appeared beside him, now wearing a child's costume, a cheap plastic clown mask over his real face, the effect unsettling and layered. "This is where you shine," Pennywise said. "Where you become a legend, where fear wears your face." He gestured. Across the street stood Laurie Strode, young, alive, real. Michael stepped forward. His foot passed through the pavement. Pennywise tutted. "No," he said. "You do not get to play that game anymore. Tonight, you watch." Michael strained against the invisible barrier holding him in place. The pressure inside him intensified, spreading, pressing outward, seeking release. Laurie looked up. For a moment, her eyes met Michael's. Then Pennywise leaned close to her ear and whispered something Michael could not hear. Laurie screamed. The scream tore through the air like a blade. Children vanished, houses decayed, paint peeling, windows blackening. The street twisted, warped, until it resembled a caricature of itself. Pennywise inhaled deeply. "There it is," he sighed. "Fear with a face, with history, with flavor." He turned to Michael. "You've been dining out on scraps all these years. I feed on the source." Michael felt it then. Not fear. Loss. The realization that what he was, what he had become, was being used, harvested, reduced to an ingredient. Pennywise grew larger. The clown's body expanded, swelling with stolen terror, limbs thickening, shadow stretching across the collapsing street. His voice deepened, layered with echoes. "You are a story," Pennywise said, "and stories belong to me." The ground cracked. Michael fell to one knee. The mask felt heavy, suffocating. For the first time, he wanted to tear it off, not to reveal himself, but to escape it. Pennywise placed a hand on Michael's head. "Not yet," he murmured. "We're only halfway through your childhood." The world shattered into darkness, and somewhere deep within that darkness, something ancient and vast stirred, pleased by the taste of a killer who still did not know he was afraid, but was learning, piece by piece, what it meant to be consumed. Darkness did not fall all at once. It seeped in, slow and deliberate, like ink soaking into paper. Michael Myers stood in it, aware of his body again, but uncertain of its boundaries. The mask was gone. So was the knife. He felt exposed in a way he had never experienced before, not vulnerable exactly, but observed, as though the darkness itself had eyes. A sound emerged, dripping, not water, time. Each drop struck an unseen surface and echoed outward, stretching, repeating, until the rhythm became unbearable. With every echo, the darkness lightened, revealing shapes suspended in the void. Televisions. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Old sets with rounded screens and dials worn smooth by fingers long since turned to dust. Each screen flickered to life, one by one, until the darkness was filled with moving images. Michael's life played around him. Not the way he remembered it, clean, efficient, stripped of meaning, but slowed, distorted, saturated with detail. Every kill lingered. Every breath drawn by his victims stretched too long. Their eyes locked on him from every angle, filled with something Pennywise had been careful to avoid showing him before. Understanding. Michael turned in place, surrounded. "You see it now, don't you?" Pennywise's voice drifted in from everywhere at once, layered and resonant, no longer bothering to sound human. "They knew you were there. They knew you were watching them die." The clown stepped out of the largest screen. He was taller now, much taller. His body bent wrong at the joints, spine curving like a question mark, arms hanging too long at his sides. His face shifted subtly as he spoke, features sliding as if struggling to settle on a single expression. "You always thought it did not matter," Pennywise continued. "That nothing touched you. But that look in their eyes?" He smiled, teeth gleaming. "That's the part you never let yourself examine." Michael clenched his fists. The pressure inside him was back, stronger than before. It pulsed with the rhythm of the dripping sound, building towards something he did not have a name for. The televisions changed. Now they showed him as a child again, sitting alone in his room, watching, waiting. His parents' voices argued somewhere off-screen, their words indistinct but sharp. Judith passed by the doorway without looking at him. Loneliness, raw and unfiltered, radiated from the images. Pennywise inhaled deeply, eyes fluttering shut in pleasure. "Oh, yes," he murmured. "That's it. That's the flavor I've been missing. Not fear, never fear. Isolation, the kind that grows teeth." The floor beneath Michael softened. He sank to his knees without realizing he had moved. The darkness thickened, wrapping around his legs like tar. Pennywise crouched in front of him, bringing his face close, too close. "Do you know why you've lasted so long?" the clown asked quietly. "Why bullets and fire and knives never seem to finish you?" Michael stared back, unblinking. "Because you were never alone," Pennywise said. "You had your story, your mask, your shape. But stories can be rewritten." The televisions flickered again. Now they showed something new. A cell. Not Smith's Grove, not Haddonfield. A sewer tunnel, circular and slick, walls pulsing faintly with veins of reddish light. Water flowed sluggishly along the bottom, carrying scraps of paper, bits of bone, things that might once have been toys. Michael recognized it. Not from memory, from instinct. Pennywise straightened, looming. "This is where I come from," he said, "and this is where you're going." The darkness peeled back. They stood at the mouth of the tunnel. The smell hit Michael immediately, sweet rot and copper, and something impossibly old. The walls seemed to breathe, contracting around them in slow, obscene rhythms. Michael stepped forward. The tunnel accepted him. With each step, his body changed. He grew heavier, denser, as though gravity itself were being recalibrated around him. The mask reappeared on his face, fusing seamlessly with his skin, its blank expression mocking him. Pennywise drifted alongside, his form now barely humanoid. His limbs split and rejoined as he moved, shadows writhing beneath his skin. "You feel it, do not you?" Pennywise said. "The way this place strips you down. No rules, no inevitability, just appetite." The tunnel widened. Ahead, something enormous shifted in the darkness, its movement sending ripples through the walls. A sound emerged, part laughter, part growl, part scream swallowed mid-breath. Michael slowed. The pressure inside him surged violently, finally breaking through its containment. Fear. Not of the thing ahead, but of being reduced to it. Pennywise stopped. He turned fully toward Michael now, his face splitting open, layers peeling back to reveal something vast and luminous beneath, lights spinning in impossible geometries, teeth arranged in patterns that hurt to look at. "There it is," Pennywise whispered reverently. "At last." The tunnel responded. The walls pulsed faster. The sound grew louder, harmonizing with Pennywise's voice. Michael tried to move forward, to attack, to assert the only truth he had ever known. His body did not obey. The mask began to crack. Hairline fractures spread across its surface, leaking something dark and viscous. Michael reached up, clawing at it, but his fingers sank into the material as though it were softening. Pennywise reached out and placed a single finger against the mask. "Stories end," he said gently. "And when they do, they feed something else." The mask shattered. Michael screamed. The sound tore out of him raw and unfiltered, echoing through the tunnel, ricocheting off the walls, spiraling upward and outward into places no human sound had ever reached. Pennywise drank it in. His body expanded, swelling to fill the tunnel, his true form pressing against reality like a hand against thin glass. The lights within him flared, brilliant and hungry. Michael collapsed. He was no longer standing, no longer kneeling. He was being pulled, drawn forward by an irresistible force, dragged toward the vast, waiting mouth of the thing Pennywise truly was. His life flashed again, but this time it did not belong to him. It belonged to Pennywise. Each kill reframed, each death transformed into nourishment. Michael saw himself not as the shape, not as an icon of terror, but as a tool, a blade used to carve fear from the world for something older and far more patient. The realization hit harder than any weapon ever had. He had never been the predator. Pennywise enveloped him. The clown's voice boomed from everywhere and nowhere, layered with triumph and ancient hunger. "Thank you," it said. "You were an exquisite meal." Michael's body dissolved. His thoughts fragmented, memories unraveling into strands of sensation that Pennywise gathered eagerly, savoring each piece. The last thing Michael felt was not pain. It was erasure. The tunnel sealed itself. Far above, in a quiet Midwestern town, the night passed without incident. No footsteps, no mask in the shadows, no knife catching the light. And deep beneath the earth, something ancient settled, satisfied, already dreaming of the next story it would tell, and the next monster it would teach to be afraid. Time resumed in pieces. Not seconds or minutes, but fragments, sensations drifting back into awareness like debris after a flood. Michael Myers existed inside those fragments, scattered and incomplete. He was not whole enough to stand or scream. He was awareness without direction, a thought without body. And Pennywise was everywhere. The sewer was gone, or perhaps it had simply unfolded into something larger. Michael drifted through a vast interior space that pulsed with color and sound. The lights bent into spirals. Shapes formed and collapsed before they could be named. This was not a place built for humans or even monsters. It was a digestive system for stories. Pennywise's true form surrounded him, not as a single entity, but as layers upon layers of perception. A clown, a spider, a constellation of burning eyes, a mouth large enough to swallow meaning itself. "Not finished," the voice echoed, patient and amused. "Oh no, you do not end a story before you savor it." Michael tried to gather himself. The instinct to endure was still there, buried deep. It had carried him through fire, bullets, blades. It pushed now, trying to reassemble him from the fragments Pennywise had torn loose. Something answered. The fragments pulled together. Michael felt weight again, shape, mass, the suggestion of limbs. He did not open his eyes. He did not know if he still had them. But sensation returned in slow, terrible increments. Cold beneath him. Stone. He lay on his back. Above him stretched a sky that was not a sky, billowing faintly red and gold, like light filtered through blood and tissue. The air tasted metallic and sweet. Michael sat up. His body was wrong, too solid in some places, too thin in others. His hands were gloved again, but the gloves felt fused to his skin. The mask had returned, but it was cracked and asymmetrical. One eye socket stretched wider than the other, as if molded around a scream that had never been meant to escape. He stood. The ground sloped gently upward, forming a hill of slick stone and bone fragments. At its peak stood Pennywise. The clown was enormous now, towering, his form constantly shifting. One moment he wore the familiar ruffled suit. The next, his body elongated into something insectile, legs jointed and sharp, the abdomen pulsing with internal light. His face peeled back in layers, revealing rows of teeth that rearranged themselves as he smiled. "You came back," Pennywise said, delighted. "They almost never do that." Michael tilted his head. The knife was back in his hand. It looked smaller than before. He advanced. Each step was heavy, as if the ground resented his presence. Pennywise watched him approach with genuine interest, head cocked, eyes bright. "Do you know what makes you special?" Pennywise asked. "You were not afraid of death. You were not afraid of pain. But now... Michael lunged. The knife struck. It sank into Pennywise's leg, or what passed for a leg in that moment. The blade disappeared up to the hilt. Pennywise looked down. Then he laughed. The sound shook the ground, sending ripples through the strange landscape. The flesh around the blade closed, swallowing it. Michael tried to pull back, but the knife was trapped, absorbed. "Oh, Michael," Pennywise said gently, "you still think this is a fight." A limb lashed out. Michael flew backward, crashing into the slope. Stone cracked beneath him. He rolled, came to a stop, and pushed himself up again, slower now. Something had changed. Each movement felt delayed, as if his body were receiving instructions too late. Pennywise was no longer reacting to him. He was anticipating him. "You see," Pennywise continued, descending the slope, his shadow swallowing Michael whole, "I do not just eat fear. I eat patterns, repetition, the same walk, the same tilt of the head, the same silence. You gave the world a shape, and now that shape belongs to me." The landscape shifted. They were no longer on the hill. They stood in Haddonfield again, but not the real one. This version was warped, exaggerated, as if drawn from memory rather than reality. Houses leaned inward. Windows blinked like eyes. The streets stretched too long, then snapped short. Michael stood in the middle of it. Across from him stood another Michael. Identical mask, identical posture, identical knife. Pennywise appeared between them, arms spread wide. "Meet yourself," he said. "The part of you that survives when the story does not need you anymore." The other Michael moved first. He attacked with brutal efficiency, mirroring every instinct Michael had ever relied on. Their knives clashed, sparks flying. They circled each other, silent, relentless. Michael realized with growing horror that he was slower. Not by much, a fraction of a second, but enough. The other Michael anticipated his movements, countered his strikes before they were fully formed. It was not reacting. It was executing a perfected version of him. Pennywise watched like an audience of one, rapt. "Yes," he murmured. "That's it. See how predictable you are?" The other Michael disarmed him. The knife skittered across the pavement and vanished. The other Michael raised his blade. Michael braced for impact. It never came. Instead, the other Michael froze. His head tilted. Slowly, cracks spread across his mask, glowing faintly from within. Pennywise frowned. "Well now," he said, "that's interesting." The double collapsed inward, folding like a paper doll, its body unraveling into strands of light and shadow that flowed back into Pennywise. The clown shuddered, savoring. He said. "That was a good one." Michael stood alone again, but something vital had been taken. He felt thinner, less anchored, as if parts of him had been edited out. Pennywise approached, towering once more. "You're running out," he said kindly. "Not of strength, of relevance." The world darkened. They stood in a familiar room, Judith's bedroom. The room was exactly as it had been that night, posters on the walls, clothes draped carelessly over a chair, and the window cracked open to let in cool autumn air. Judith stood by the mirror, brushing her hair, humming softly. Michael stood in the doorway, small again, the knife heavy in his hand. Pennywise crouched beside him, whispering in his ear. "This is where you began," he said. Do you want to see how you end? Judith turned. She looked at Michael, but her eyes were Pennywise's. She screamed, and the sound did not stop. It stretched, elongating, becoming the scream of every victim Michael had ever claimed, layered and harmonized into a single, unbearable note. Michael clutched his head. The sound pierced him, not as fear, but as overload. Too much input, too much meaning forced into a mind built for silence. Pennywise opened his mouth. It was vast, endless, a geometry of hunger. "Come now," the clown said, voice resonant and deep. "You've carried this long enough." The scream pulled Michael forward. His feet left the floor, and he was lifted, drawn toward Pennywise's mouth, his body unraveling again into pieces, memories, impulses, habits, each one plucked and tasted. Michael reached out, not to resist, but to understand. In that final moment of clarity, he saw it. He had never been empty. He had been unfinished. And Pennywise was finishing him. The clown closed his mouth, the scream cut off, and the room vanished. Somewhere deep beneath reality, something ancient settled again, fuller now, heavier with stolen shape and silence. And in Haddonfield, the legend of Michael Myers did not end with a body or a grave. It simply stopped, as if someone had turned the page and found nothing written there anymore. What remained of Michael Myers drifted, not as a soul, he had never believed in such things, but as an afterimage, a smear left behind when something heavy is dragged across a surface for too long. Pennywise had eaten most of him, the violence, the repetition, the myth. But digestion, Michael learned, was not always immediate. He existed now in a place between gulps. This place resembled a town square seen through thick glass. Shapes moved beyond it, distorted and slow. Sounds arrived muffled, warped, as if spoken underwater. The air hummed with a low, constant vibration that made thought difficult. Michael tried to walk. The idea of walking did not translate. There was no ground, only resistance. Every attempt to move met a gentle but absolute refusal, like pushing against the inside of a closed eyelid. "Well," Pennywise said, his voice arriving without direction, "this is usually the boring part." The clown appeared, smaller again, almost human-sized. He sat cross-legged in the air, floating comfortably, elbows resting on his knees. His face was calm, satisfied, the way a person looks after a very good meal. "You're not screaming anymore," Pennywise observed. "That's progress." Michael tried to respond. The attempt formed no words, no sound. What emerged instead was a pressure, a dull insistence, the need to persist, to continue. Pennywise smiled. "Yes, yes," he said. "I know. You do not stop. That's the whole point of you. But let me show you something." The glassy barrier peeled away. Michael found himself standing properly this time, in a vast chamber shaped like a cathedral built by something that had never seen one. The arches were wrong. The angles offended the eye. Light poured in from sources that did not exist, casting shadows that moved independently of the objects that made them. All around the chamber were figures, monsters, not symbolic ones, not metaphors. These were the real things, shapes that had stalked humanity since it first learned how to be afraid, Creatures from caves, from forests, from oceans deeper than light could reach. Some were half-formed, still dreaming themselves into being. Others were old, ancient beyond measure, their forms eroded by centuries of belief and disbelief. They were feeding. Fear flowed through the chamber like incense, rising from unseen worlds, curling into mouths and maws and sensory organs that defied classification. Pennywise stood among them, not as a peer, but as a favored child.
"This," Pennywise said, spreading his arms, "is the ecosystem."
Michael felt something then that resembled shock, not fear, perspective. "You were never alone," Pennywise continued. "You were never unique. You were a mask the world liked to wear. Simple, durable, easy to remember." He gestured, and an image bloomed in the air, a movie screen. Michael watched himself on it, his walk, his mask, his knife, replayed endlessly. Different actors, different timelines, same shape. "Do you know what happens to monsters when people stop being afraid of them?" Pennywise asked. The screen flickered. It showed empty theaters, streaming menus, nostalgia, jokes. "They fade," Pennywise said simply. "They starve." The image changed again. Children huddled around a storm drain. Not in fear, in excitement, laughing, daring each other to look inside. Pennywise's smile sharpened. "But some of us adapt." Michael understood then. This was not just feeding. It was succession. Pennywise turned back to him. "You're obsolete," the clown said kindly. "A classic, sure. But classics get archived, preserved, studied. They do not hunt anymore." Michael felt the pressure return, surging violently. The instinct to kill, to assert, to reject this conclusion flared one last time. His body responded. The knife appeared in his hand again, larger now, heavier, vibrating with borrowed reality. He charged. Pennywise did not move.
Michael crossed the distance in a heartbeat and plunged the blade straight into Pennywise's chest. For a moment, there was resistance. Then the blade slid in like it was entering warm wax. Pennywise looked down at it, curious. He said. "Still trying to end things the old way." The chest around the knife opened. Not split, opened. Like an eye. Inside was not flesh, but a vast interior, glowing with slow, pulsing light. Shapes moved there. Worlds, memories, mouths within mouths. Michael felt himself being pulled forward. He tried to pull the knife back. His arm went with it. The suction increased, gentle but absolute. Pennywise placed a hand on Michael's shoulder, not restraining him, not pushing, guiding. "You've done very well," Pennywise said softly. "You fed me for decades without knowing it. That kind of service deserves a proper ending." Michael's torso crossed the threshold. Pain arrived then, sudden and overwhelming, not physical, but existential. Every rule that had ever governed him, silence, inevitability, persistence, collapsed at once. He was being unmade, not destroyed, but recontextualized. Inside Pennywise, time behaved differently. Michael experienced his childhood again, but not as memory, as flavor. The stillness, the watching, the first lift of the knife. Pennywise savored each moment, slowing them down, stretching them thin. "Yes," the clown murmured. "There it is. The quiet before the scream you never made. Michael's legs vanished, then his torso, and then his arms. He was a head and a scream that had waited too long. Pennywise leaned closer. "You always wondered what you were," he said. "Here's the answer." Michael's mask cracked one final time, not from pressure, from comprehension. Pennywise bit down. The sound was not a crunch, not a snap, but a soft, wet closure, like a book being shut after the last page. The cathedral dimmed. The other creatures glanced up briefly, and then returned to feeding. Pennywise straightened, wiping his mouth, visibly fuller now. His form stabilized, sharper, more defined, as if absorbing Michael had clarified something essential. Far above, in the human world, Halloween night came and went. No shape appeared. No footsteps followed. People waited. They always did. And somewhere beneath reality, Pennywise smiled, already tasting the future, new fears, new shapes, new stories, carrying within him the last, quiet echo of a monster who had finally learned what it meant to be afraid and had been eaten for it.